What makes a great martial artist? What makes a good martial artist is purpose. You may hear me talk about purpose as it relates to other aspects of our lives, but in this particular instance, it's martial arts and purpose. Why are you in martial arts? Why do you study? Why do you train in? Why do you exercise yourself in the martial arts? I can speak from a personal standpoint, but those of you that have partook in this lifestyle, you can speak for yourselves. You and only you know your purpose and the reasons that you do what you do. But me personally, it is a point of, don't want to sound too cliche, but it is a point of self discovery. Now, we can go through self discovery in a lot of different types of venues and endeavors, vocations, if you will. But to me, martial arts is existential. I believe that it is a great part of who I am as a person. And I don't separate martial arts from Reginald. It's me. I can't say that I do it for a living because I don't. I teach martial arts as a part of my living, but martial arts itself, or martial science, is part of who I am. That's akin to the diet that I have, that I'm vested in. There are certain things that I will not change about myself as it relates to what I put in and on my body. That's who I am. Not knocking anyone else that indulges in other types of activities and so forth. I can only speak for me, and I'm only speaking for me. But as it relates to martial arts, I don't believe that martial artists should smoke cigarettes. Detrimental to your health. In an immediate sense, even over time, you may develop cancer from smoking. It's still going to affect your performance. That's one. Number two, drinking alcohol. I personally don't believe that martial artists should drink alcohol. I'm going to qualify this statement about alcohol, and it's not to make an excuse for those who do, and it is not to pacify those that do. You know what personal responsibility is. What's the purpose of alcohol in drinking alcohol? What is the purpose? I would still ask the question about smoking cigarettes. What's the purpose of smoking cigarettes? Is cigarette smoking beneficial or detrimental to you? Is drinking alcohol beneficial or detrimental to you? Is taking drugs beneficial or detrimental to you? That's the third thing. And again, we all have come different paths to arrive where we are today. We're all different. I'm not judging anyone. I'm not saying that I'm better than anyone. I'm just giving you some insight into what I see and what I believe in terms of what makes a martial artist great. Of course, you must choose to be a martial artist. There are some who at a young age, maybe even teenager, who was maybe encouraged by your parents to join a club or school or a dojo as an extracurricular activity, a hobby, maybe even simply for self-defense, which is noble. And somehow you found yourself there for a couple years, half a dozen years, a dozen years, and maybe even 20, 30 years. So, what was that staying power? What caused you to stay so long and be so dedicated, so devoted to this thing we call the martial arts? Purpose, I would hope. You see, martial arts is not a hobby. That was not its original purpose. The original purpose and or intent behind martial arts or martial science is the development of the human being species in virtually every aspect of their lives. Even though the ability to protect oneself, one's loved ones, was pretty much the foundation for many people during the creation of most of the arts, and then subsequently used in the military as part of the training of the soldiers in various countries, villages, provinces, and so forth. Martial arts was a staple for hand-to-hand combat and even primitive types of weapons. Now we have guns, machine guns and rifles and those types of things. But originally, most of the arts were the human being was the weapon. Learning to develop the science of fighting, knowing how to strike an individual, where the vulnerable targets on a human being were, and what was the appropriate method to access those targets and to get the most result from striking, pressing, or rubbing even those targets, if we're talking in terms of pressure points. You must understand why. In the world in which we live today, there are those things that are legitimate and those things that are counterfeit. Things, in other words, that are real and those things that are those that appear to be real. I've heard people refer to McDojo, and that was to say that these are just these pop up every morning or every month or every year martial arts schools that had no real foundation in fighting or self-defense. But just because someone could merchandise and advertise and market and had a little bit of money, they could start raking in even more money just by gift of gab, advertisements, marketing, and so forth, and just having a nice facility. But it does not necessarily mean that you are credible. Who was your instructor? Who is your instructor? Do you belong to a renowned martial arts system or master, grandmaster, or guru, or what have you? Who do you teach? Where do you teach? What ages do you teach? Do you teach both genders? Do you accept students that are quick to anger? Do you monitor and vet your students or potential students to make sure as much as possible that you're not signing up someone that could potentially ruin the reputation of the instructor and or school? You see, what I'm talking about right now are the traits of a good or great martial artist. Those that have students, that is. But as it relates to the individual, what makes you great? What makes you great is creating and giving value as it relates to the art of pugilism, the art of martial science, value. Before you ever accept a dollar from any student or potential student, you must be true to yourself and ask yourself the question: am I here for money alone, under the guise of being a martial arts school? Do I have the ability to teach? Everyone that joins a martial arts school and receives ranking throughout the time that they're there, even up to black belt or even master, are not good at public relations. Some of them are not good at business. Some of them have anger issues. Some of them are not patient and not even disciplined themselves. Are you one of those individuals? You see, these are the things that determine whether or not we are great as well. Do you train in the fundamentals of your art? You see, there is no advanced techniques, no advanced knowledge in any aspect of life. And martial arts is no different unless you have a solid foundation. You must have a firm foundation, and everything else is built upon that foundation. But if the foundation is shaky, then everything else will be shaky as well and collapse. Structure. For example, every student in any martial arts style or system should know how to stretch, how to condition their bodies, how to breathe. Forget for a moment the other things such as the salutation, coming to attention, and bowing, and saluting, and these various things, and the ornamental aspect as far as belts and uniforms and things of that nature. I'm talking about the people. Do you know how to breathe properly? Do you know how to build muscle if you have to? Do you know how to stretch to keep your body supple and a good circulatory system as a result thereof? Do you know how to build your cardiovascular system by doing aerobic types of exercises? Those things that people do in gymnasiums and physical education, and not just simply martial arts types of physical exercises. That's a foundation by itself. Another thing that every martial arts system and or style should have a part of it would be ukemi, falling. It means to fall away. That's a Japanese word. Do you know how to take a fall? In other words, if you were to fall down, do you know the proper way to minimize the injury to yourself if you fell down? Front, back, or side. And in some instances, you may have to roll out of a situation if you pushed from behind. Do you understand the art of falling? Because it is indeed an art. Do you know how to stand I'm not talking about necessarily kibadachi or kimajase, horse stance, Korean and Japanese. And I'm not talking about a back stance and a front stance. Do you know the proper way to stance or to stand? Left, right, a normal or natural stance? How to position yourself if there's a potential threat? Do you know that that's fundamental as well? Do you know proper train of thought? When dealing with people who have an aggressive nature and or behavior. You see, these things that I'm talking to you now about have everything to do with what makes you great as a martial artist. Now, don't forget, and I did not dismiss the fact that I mentioned smoking, drinking alcohol, and taking drugs. Why are you taking drugs? Now, do I really have to answer this question for you? I have a problem with martial artists that take drugs. I'm talking about drugs that change and alter your way of thinking, that make you high. Let's get to the point. Have a problem with that. Now there are those out there that wants to defend their position and or stance and say, well, that's your opinion. No, I don't have an opinion as it relates to this particular subject. That's a fact. You don't need to be stimulated by a chemical when, just by virtue of the fact that you are a human being and that you are a living, breathing soul and that the universe is vast, everything that we need is contained within. And if you feel that you need some outside stimulus to make you more clear as it relates to your thinking and the way in which you process things, you're sadly mistaken. And this includes alcohol. I know and have known many martial artists that love to hang out in the local pub, bar, liquor establishment. Certain holidays come around, they like to get their drink on, as they say, tipsy, high, mellow, chilling, all of the convenient terms that they like. I'm not beating up on them, but I'll never do it. You know why? I want to be clear in my head. I want to have mental clarity. I don't want anything to disturb my focus. And I don't need any outside substance to do so. Now, how many of us, of you, speaking collectively, that drink to the point where you're drunk? Don't know where you are. You wake up the next day with a hangover, headache, throwing up, urinating on yourself, cursing someone out, even a loved one, a family member, to include children and or your husband or wife. Violent tendencies because you don't have any clarity mentally. I don't ever want to be in a situation where I'm not in control of my own faculties mentally because I have drank alcohol. And as I began to say, how many of you can control your liquor? I have not seen too many martial artists that were drinking alcohol that could do so. Just because you have the title of a karate man or kung fu master or teacher or what have you, does not exclude you from being irresponsible when it comes to drinking and smoking and taking drugs. Doesn't exclude you. It doesn't give you a pass and say, well, you're better than most because you study martial arts and I'm disciplined. I've seen drunk masters and martial artists before, stumbling around, slurred speech. But you're a martial artist, right? But there are people around you that say, oh, we had a good time last night. That's not a good time. Do you call that a good time? Being out of your mind, stoned out of your mind, I don't call that a good time. Life is a good time for me, and I don't need anything to enhance life. Just knowing that I'm alive and breathing, and I have my mental faculties about myself is a good time. No artificial stimulation. And for those that smoke, I've heard it said before, I've been smoking since I was a child. I've been smoking for 20 years. It's hard to quit. But you are the martial artist, right? Note that the word artist follows martial, war artist. You are the martial artist. And you smoke. So you've made the decision that you're going to limit your life by damaging your lungs and your internal organs by smoking something that has nicotine and carcinogenic properties. Carcinogenic means cancer causing properties. You know, it's one thing to do something that you're not aware of and have something bad happen to you. But it is an entirely different thing to do something when you know what the outcome is going to be or could potentially be down the road, and that you could potentially lose your life as a result of your behavior. But you do it anyway. Now, there is a warning, and it took a while for the Surgeon General to put certain types of warning on tobacco products. And the reason it took a while because throughout history, the Surgeon General worked for the tobacco company or very closely with the tobacco company because of their lobbyists and so forth. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry. They didn't want to lose money, so they were a little standoffish with the warning. And eventually, they started putting warnings on cigarette packages and tobacco packaging, warning cigarette smoke or smoking can cause or may cause cancer or lung cancer. It's not advised for women that are pregnant and so forth. Could cause mouth cancer if it's chewing tobacco and so forth. Took a while because multi-billion-dollar industry again. So if something has a warning on it like that it could potentially cause death, such as alcohol. Alcohol again is a multi-billion-dollar industry alone. And it has warnings on it. Drink responsibly. Do not operate machinery and motor vehicles while drinking. And you see people all of the time on the news channels that have been drinking while intoxicated and they've killed themselves or killed and maybe injured someone else, and they're going to prison or jail depending on the extent of it, all because of alcohol. Those people didn't have very much control of self. Now, life is hard enough. Life can deal you some heavy blows. It's hard enough. Why make it harder as a martial artist? By consuming things that could kill you. And you know that it could kill you. You know that it can diminish your health in not too long of a time. Now, I know there are those that want to say, well, what about sugar, brother teacher? Here's where we as human beings have to think. There's always someone that wants to try to denigrate and minimalize someone who's using critical thinking and someone who brings out a great point or something that's of value. And And 99% of the time, it's always someone who doesn't want to change those parts of their lives and their behavior. It's usually those individuals. But people who really care about life and their lives, they don't have a problem with what I'm saying. But unfortunately, there are those who feel like they have to throw shade back at you and say, well, you like chocolate chip cookies. By the way, that's a true statement. I do like chocolate chip cookies. Chocolate chip cookies I can not have. It will. You just have to trust me on this. I cannot have chocolate chip cookies. But chocolate chip cookies do not have the power that a cigarette does over the human mind or brain. It does not have the power that marijuana, I said it, there's a lot of people that do it. You can say, oh, I do it for medicinal reasons. I have medical marijuana. I'm not talking about you. I'm talking about the people who just want to get a high, who want to get a buzz. It's not the same as drinking alcohol. Alcohol alters your way of thinking. That's why you have to have an ID when you purchase alcohol and tobacco products, because of the type of drugs they are, and they are drugs. Now, talking about a martial arts master or a great martial artist, even if you're not a master or labeled as or promoted as, just what makes a great martial artist? I said before that martial arts to me was a point of self-discovery. We have something that helps us find out what we're made of. Some people may use other methods. Martial arts just happen to be my way of life, and many, many hundreds of thousands of others, maybe millions. Self-discovery. I've learned about my temperance, my self-control. I've learned about my discipline, how to say no, how to redirect situations that could potentially become hostile. I've learned my limitations and my strengths as it relates to techniques, range of motion, and things that I could do and couldn't do as it related to my studies. I've learned those things about myself. I also learned, since I'm older now, how we diminish in many of those things that we were strong in at a much younger age. I've learned that, and I've paid attention because I've taught so many people martial arts over the years, and I've been involved with so many people, and I've participated in so many martial arts events in my life. I've seen and observed and held close to me those experiences. And once I became older, I began to go through some of those same experiences. Experiences of what? Pain, injuries, arthritis. And it made me a different martial artist. Still a martial artist. Still a martial artist just the same. But I'm a different one. I'm more cautious. I'm wiser. I can't do a lot of the things that I used to do when I was much younger. And that's all of us, for the most part. And I'm more humble. Not that I never was humble, but I'm more humble. Because life is short. This is part of my journey again. Life is short. And we have to learn how to value life and not just simply talk about it as if we actually represent it. There are many people who say things because it sounds like the right thing to say. There are people who say things because they've been modeled or they've been taught to say those things, yet they don't live those things that they say. You have to love humanity as a martial artist, a true martial artist. This is one of the things that make you great as well. You have to love and respect another person, another human being, and realize that that's your neighbor. Notwithstanding, we do know that there is violence in the world carried out every day on the innocent by other people. There are murders, molestation, or rape, pedophilia, robberies. These things happen by everyday citizens against other citizens that are unaware, unexpecting, or suspecting that these things are going to take place, and even knowingly. We live in a very violent world, whether many want to accept it or not, but we do. And we must learn how to walk circumspectly, as if today were our last day. So if it's not broken in some people's minds, don't try to fix it. That's what some people say. If it's not broke, don't try to fix it. There are some things that are broken, such as people's heart. And I'm not talking about relationships per se. Broken. There are people who are heartless, is what I'm getting at, who have no issue with walking up to you and robbing you and blowing your brains out, or even attacking you in masses, one individual, just for kicks. No pun intended. These things happen. There was even a thing, a situation a few years ago, they call it a knockout type of scenario, where there were people walking up to elderly people or just other individuals that seemed like they could take advantage of them, and they were swinging on them as hard as they could and knocking them out, just punching them in the face or the head. These people exist in our world. Now, I know the way in which I started this video may have seemed to have deviated from the original premise, but it hasn't really. It's still about what makes a great martial artist. What makes a great martial artist, ladies and gentlemen, is character. Now, I've heard people say character is developed. It is something that you develop. And I can agree with that to a great degree. Character is built over time. But sometimes there are those, and when I say character, I'm talking about good character. But there are those who are not meant to be in certain places in life. There are those men and even women who join the martial arts ranks, who join the martial arts roles in school. They sign up and they're not a good fit, but they stay anyway, or the instructors let them stay anyway, and they end up being a disgrace to their school and to the instructors because they lack proper character. And this stems from their early childhood and them not being taught a certain way or the proper way as they were growing up. And they carry that personality trait, or they carry that character into the martial arts school. Now, we can't expect miracles necessarily when you join a school, especially you parents who have brought your children up to be 14, 15 years old, and you put them in a martial arts school. If you have not been a great example to them, what's the instructor going to do? Change their mind? Even though these may have happened in some rare instances, but by no means is that the rule. You see, character, when you come into a martial arts school, especially if you're an adult joining a martial arts school, your character should already be set. And all the martial arts is going to do for you is enhance what you already have. And the same is true conversely. If you are quick tempered, if you have an anger issue, if you can't accept losing, especially when it comes to martial arts competition and sparring and all of these types of things that's commonly done in martial arts, if you can't accept those things, then that stems from you coming up and someone maybe perhaps not doing their job when they raised you to keep you going down the straight and the narrow path. Someone let go of you at some point. And maybe your parent or your mother or father didn't know how to give these things to you, these qualities or values to you, to teach you that sometimes you lose in life and you can't win all of the time in life. And what I'm saying to you right now, again, too, is this is what makes a great martial artist. Being able to take a loss. And being able to accept that I can't do everything. Or that I'm limited. Or that's not my particular strength. That's what makes great men and women in any aspect of life. Acceptance of who you are. But with that said, you must also learn that whatever life has given you in terms of your physiology, let's say, that's what you have to work with. You should never compare yourself to the next guy or gal and say, oh, they're much faster than I am. They're much flexible than I am. They're stronger than I am. They're more agile than I am. You have to be the best you that you can possibly be and accept that we are all simply different. When I was coming up, there were guys that were much bigger than me, taller than me, heavier than me. They had attributes, power, strength. Me being smaller, I had speed, flexibility, agility, stealth. I was able to execute many combinations and so forth. That was my advantage over them. But I would not dare stand in front of them because they would have the advantage then by using their brute force and or strength. And if we were wrestling on the ground or doing jiu-jitsu, then they would have a greater advantage over me. So I would always have to be more cunning. You see, both sides have an advantage. That's what I'm getting at. And there were guys who were shorter. They had an advantage. There were guys who were much taller. They had the advantage of reach. They had the length, both kicking and punching. But you take that distance away from them, if you're a shorter person and you get in close, then that's your advantage. In other words, stay in your lane. You have to learn what your attributes are. You have to learn what your qualities are, what your strong points are, and your weaknesses at the same time. And learn to meld them together. And learn to adapt. That's what makes you great as well. This is not a hyperbole. The greatest thing that makes us great, the greatest thing that makes us great is having purpose, discipline, dedication, and staying power. I am here today doing this video, for example, and in a few more months, maybe several months, this new year coming up, I'll be turning 60 years old. And I will be celebrating, if you will, 50 years in the martial arts, staying power. And did you not know I started at the age of 10? I have never, since the age of 10, stopped training. I have never stopped studying, and I have never stopped teaching when I did start teaching martial arts. Up until this present day, I continue. That's called staying power. That's called keeping your shoulder to the wheel. That's called dedication. And this is what makes one great as well. Staying power. It's not a burden. Another thing to take into consideration also is, as I alluded to earlier, about when you get older, you begin to receive injuries sometimes, and you slow down, and you have back problems, and you have various other physical maladies and or issues, and you still stick with it. You still don't stop. You continue on. That's another quality of a great martial artist. I will never, as I'm sitting here speaking to you now, I will never stop being a part of the martial arts and teaching, studying, and training therein until I am no longer able to do it. Never will. Now, if I've done it for 50 years, why would I even stop now? I wouldn't. I've done martial arts longer than any job. I have been in the martial arts longer than I have ever had any job in my entire life. It has been my life, and it still is my life. It's not a hobby. It's not a part-time gig. It's not a recreational thing. It's the embodiment of me as well. That was it. What makes one great in the martial arts. Now, I didn't intend to offend anyone with this video when I talked about some of the detriments, smoking, drinking, and doing drugs as a martial artist. But these are the things that we have to consider as martial artists. We have to be good examples. If you have children in your class and that you teach martial arts to, you have to set the standard. They're watching you even when you think they're not watching you. The same is true if you're not a martial artist. Your children are watching you when you don't think that they're watching you. They're paying attention to you. So why not be that example of that which is honorable and upright to them? Because you don't want to ever go down as some bad instructor. This instructor was always partying. This instructor was drunk occasionally from time to time. This instructor's hanging out in bars and clubs with street fights and shooting and things like that. I've known some cases. That's why I even brought that up. You should always be that humble guy or girl, lady, if you will, that's respected by your community, respected by your family and your friends for taking a stance, a position in our society and making a difference in other people's lives. That's for the positive. That's what makes you great as a martial artist. Not how many people's behinds you can kick, or not how tough you think you are, or how many trophies you won or championships that you won. All of that stuff is superficial. Those trophies and those plaques and awards get dusty after a while. They begin to fall apart as well. But the true award and reward is standing for something that you can leave behind a legacy for the next generation that people can respect. That's what makes you great as a martial artist. And that was all I really had to say. So continue to study and to train and to even teach for those of you who are instructors in the martial arts. Be encouraged, hang in there as we all go through this pandemic situation. I don't know if, as of the recording of this video, if any of you have already taken the vaccination or the vaccine. I don't plan on taking it. Just a footnote. I don't. You may hear me talk about it again in another video subsequent. But study the world that you live in. Stop accepting things just because someone said it. Ask yourself the question. This is on the vaccine before I conclude. What's in it? I just ask you a real question. What's in it? Research it and then ask if they are transparent enough to tell you what's in it or to show you what's in it. What's the possible side effects or ramifications of me taking this that could be harmful to me or my children or my grandchildren in the future? That's the question that you really, really have to be asking. That was really it. You know what I'm going to say. Have a great day, afternoon, or evening, wherever you may be on planet Earth. And Yahweh loves you, and Brother Teacher loves you. Think on these things. So long.